to the continued zoning and land use proposal for the tract that Grace Connection Church of Tampa Bay currently occupies. If the clerk would please display the first slide. PGSP has accumulated over 600 email subscribers, has delivered to the city roughly 500 postcards signed by residents opposed to the zoning change, and almost 1,500 signatures from our change.org petition opposing the approval of Flume 58 zoning and land use changes. We represent the majority of the opposition to Flume 58 and appreciate the opportunity to voice our concerns. First, we'd like to recognize City Council and staff for its hard work in addressing the city's housing needs and balancing that against the need to preserve the character of the city's established neighborhoods. Balancing multiple interests is a tough job, and we thank you for that. Second, we applaud the CPPC for its decision to uphold the policies set forth in the comprehensive plan and for acknowledging and taking special care to understand the character and composition of our neighborhood and denying the approval of Flume 58. Many refer to the comprehensive plan as the city's constitution for responsible growth management. It establishes the rights for citizens and adjacent local governments to have legal standing in order to challenge plans and amendments. It offers guidelines to prevent inconsistent land use and developments. The spirit of the comprehensive plan manifests itself the very moment you enter a neighborhood and feel its character. Think about your own home for a moment, where you established your roots. Likely you chose the location you did because you fell in love with the character of the neighborhood, the proximity to schools, transportation, shopping, and sense of community. This character is a major influence on why one would or would not establish roots in any one particular neighborhood. It is because of these guidelines within NS1 of the comprehensive plan that residents of the Pasadena Bear Creek neighborhood chose to call this their home. In section 16.20.020.1, it states, suburban neighborhood characteristics include single-use development, horizontally oriented architecture, relatively large lot and frontages, and wide residential streets and buildings that respond to the needs of automobile travel. When the city initiated their own process to purchase the subject property, they had an appraisal done where, in establishing the highest and best use, the appraiser highlighted the following for its determination. The intent of the NS1 classification is to, quote, protect the single-family character of these neighborhoods while permitting rehabilitation, improvement, and redevelop it in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood, end of quote. The appraiser acknowledged, your very own appraiser acknowledged, that the institutional land use designation must be changed to a residential classification. However, he stated, and I quote, the most reasonable, legally allowed use of the site would be single-family residential, end of quote. That is why the city's own appraiser omitted statements suggesting higher density projects as an option. Clearly, because that would conflict with the guidelines set forth by the NS1 zoning. The CPPC cited 3 land use element policies which support the conclusion that this proposal compromises the character, scale, and horizontal orientation of the surrounding neighborhood. The inconsistencies of the proposed changes lie within LU 3.4, 3.6, and 3.8, and gave the CPPC enough pause to overwhelmingly deny the application 1 to 5. As a direct reference, Commissioner Wolf noted that 3.4 requires compatible transition between neighborhoods. 3.6, which projects should weigh very heavily on the established character, and 3.8 to protect existing and future residential uses from incompatible uses. Commissioner Winters took a special interest and used Google Street View to better understand the composition of our neighborhood. She noted her concerns that the area is, and I quote, distinctively single-family, low density, and mostly a one-story kind of neighborhood, end of quote. Commissioner Winters and Commissioner Wolf both expressed their concerns that even 3 to 4 stories would be a, quote, stark contrast, end of quote, to the surrounding area. If the clerk would bring up slide number 2 and play it without sound. Is this slide here 2? I think it is. So to support the claim that these zoning and land use amendments do fit the character of the surrounding area, the applicant and the city reference a multifamily dwelling and the South Pasadena Mobile Home Park. The multifamily dwelling was built in 1975. The mobile home park was established in the 1950s. Both were developed prior to the establishment of the comprehensive plan under the Florida Growth Management Act of 1985, where successes and failures from the previous 10 years were addressed. These properties were grandfathered. Madam Clerk, could you switch to slide 3, please? Please note that both referenced developments are no taller than 2 stories. These dwellings should bear no weight in the argument made by the appellant or the city, as they were established prior to the implementation of the Florida Growth Management Act. For further consideration, the proposed zoning change would not only end the life of a church, which has served the community for over 60 years, but housing occupancy on that tract would go from 0 to possibly 1 to 400 residents. How is this in keeping within the scale of the community? Even the Flume 58 report on page 3 of that report states that these zoning changes would establish a, quote, residential land use designation and density higher than the surrounding neighborhood to the north, west, and east, end of quote. With the proposed density bonuses, the possible height of those buildings could be up to 7 stories tall, despite a site plan, but absent a binding agreement limiting the height to 4 stories. Isn't even 4 stories inconsistent with the horizontal orientation as described in the comprehensive plan? Other questions still remain. What about the children and the 15+ school buses that pick up and drop off right in front of the church on 64th Street? Do kids matter? Separately, is a mass transit bus stop going to be added? This would be entirely intrusive to the neighborhood and change the current proposed purpose and usage of 64th Street. Commissioner Rogo, who has a notable background in affordable housing developments, noted that he is concerned with the lack of mass transit available for the subject property. Next, CM10B, as referenced in the Flume 58 report, says the city shall direct the population concentrations away from known coastal high hazard areas. The proposed changes do not satisfy the requirement, but it also does not address the emergency services or responses during hurricane events. What is the evacuation plan with the presumed limited transit options? Many of these concerns and questions could have been squelched had the applicant adhered to the strong recommendation outlined in section 16.70.040.1, subparagraph F of the comprehensive plan, which encourages the applicant to engage the surrounding neighborhood. This was the astute foresight from Commissioner Michaels, who emphasized that he would like to see the applicant and developer engage the community more to establish a, quote, consensus proposal, end of quote. City staff has noted that they were unaware of any attempts of public outreach or collaboration by the applicant. PGSP can attest that there have been no such attempts at collaboration or engagement. We ask the City Council heavily weigh the aforementioned inconsistencies with the intent and spirit of the comprehensive plan. We ask the City Council to maintain the relevance, integrity, and value of the CPPC recommendations.